comparing Queen Elizabeth and Queen Victoria. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. And today we're going to take a look at the similarities between Queen Elizabeth and her great-great-grandmother. They both served long reigns and they both were young when they took the throne. So what else did they have in common? Let's find out. So they both met their future husbands at a young age. Prince Albert's uncle Leopold wanted his nephew to marry his cousin Victoria. He introduced them on May the 18th, 1836 in England. Queen Victoria was 17 years old and celebrating her birthday, according to Royal UK. And they met again in 1839 and got engaged in that year. The marriage took place on the 10th of February, 1840 in the Chapel Royal at St. James Palace. According to Us Weekly, 8-year-old Elizabeth met Philip in 1934 while attending a wedding for Princess Marina and Prince George. 5 years later, the pair reconnected at ages 13 and 18 while they were at the Royal Navy College in Dartmouth. Their second encounter is where they fell in love and began exchanging letters. So they both chose loyal husbands who were supportive and great fathers. They both had a few kids. Queen Victoria and Albert had 9 children, which was pretty impressive. They had 5 girls and 4 boys. And Queen Victoria ended up with 45 grandchildren. Oh boy, that's a lot. Her nickname was the Grandmother of Europe. We can see why. And then Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip had 4 kids. And Elizabeth wrote a letter to her parents while she was on her honeymoon. And she said to them, "I only hope that I can bring up my children in the happy atmosphere of love and fairness which Margaret and I have grown up." So that was a sweet letter, and I'm sure her parents were honored. They both loved their jobs. Queen Victoria was queen for 63 years and 7 months, and she took a little time off after the death of Prince Albert, but other than that, she was always on the job. Queen Victoria had impressive numbers, but it wasn't nearly as long as her great-great-granddaughter. Queen Elizabeth served for over 70 years. It was the longest of any British monarch and the longest verified reign of any female head of state in history. Queen Victoria took her position at the age of 18. Queen Elizabeth was 25. When Queen Elizabeth was queen in her reign, at one point she ruled over 1/4 of the world's landmass. Well, that's something else. And according to NBCnews.com, Victoria was deeply committed in the advancement of the empire. Roberts added that Victorian values laid the foundation for a middle-class confidence that made the Britain a force to be reckoned with. She turned the monarchy from one of absolute power into a constitutionally limited monarchy of the kind that we understand today. And she died a popular queen, but it wasn't always that way. When Prince Albert died, Queen Victoria sort of became invisible. She did her work, but she didn't make any public appearances. When her husband died, she didn't do anything. She didn't see anyone. She became invisible queen until way towards the end of her reign. And Queen Elizabeth seemed to have more of a sense of duty. Even when her husband was in the hospital, she still did her duties. Victoria eventually returned to the public eye after her son, Edward, a future king, beat a severe illness in 1871. She realized the public wanted to see her, so she adapted to it. Queen Elizabeth had a sixth sense for politics and always seemed to make the right moves. The year 1992 was a bad one for the royal family. It was the separation of Prince Charles and Diana Spencer and Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, and she formed the Way Ahead Committee. The committee, chaired by the Queen, was behind the Royalist Succession Act of 2013, which will see firstborn females ascend to the throne. Roberts said the move was an example of the Queen's forward thinking. And Queen Elizabeth had a rough spot also when Princess Diana died. Historically, when there's a death in the family, the royals retreat into mourning. So the Queen thought the way to deal with the death of Diana was just to stay quiet, look after the boys, and go to church, and try to keep life on an even keel. But those loyal to Queen Elizabeth were upset that she stayed behind at Balmoral and didn't say anything at first. The Queen could feel the public was getting angry. So the Queen returned to London 5 days later and gave an unprecedented television tribute to her ex-daughter-in-law. She also responded to the public outcry by breaking protocol and flying the Union flag at half-staff above Buckingham Palace, something that had never been done. She knew the Queen in modern times had to be public, and Queen Elizabeth improved the royal family's image, and she brought the monarchy back from its lowest point to being almost universally popular. Well, they were both animal lovers. Queen Victoria started to ride horses after the death of her husband. She loved all animals, especially dogs and horses. and Queen Elizabeth shared the same love. She loved all kinds of animals, especially dogs and racehorses. And they were both similar in personality. According to Plymouth.ac.uk, both grew up to love dancing, music, and parties. Both had a strong sense of humor, and in private at least, Victoria very frequently was amused. And we all know that the Queen enjoys a good joke, and they both love dogs, and Scotland, especially Balmoral. Well, they both became queen by chance, according to the UK News.Yahoo. Queen Victoria's father, Prince Edward, Duke of Kent, was fourth in line to the throne after his older brothers, but none of them had children, leaving his daughter to inherit the throne. And Princess Elizabeth's uncle, King Edward, abdicated, putting the crown on her father's head, and then eventually her own. So what innovations happened during their reign? Well, Queen Victoria ruled over the British Empire, and Queen Elizabeth is the head of the Commonwealth, the Church, and the Armed Forces. Under Victoria, the first factories and free schools arrived. New transport was invented, including the steam trains, steamships, the London Underground, bicycles, and cars. And rich Victorians began to explore the world by boat and train. Important Victorian inventions include telephones, a flushing toilet, stamps, post boxes. And under Elizabeth II, a man first went to the moon, television came into the people's homes, the internet began, and people had home computers. The difference is in political matters. Queen Victoria in her day had more political power than Queen Elizabeth did. Queen Elizabeth didn't want that, and she wasn't allowed to anyway. And Queen Elizabeth was more a facilitator. While they both loved being in nature, like Queen Elizabeth, Victoria enjoyed a simple domestic rural life when she could. Her tastes were homely and almost rural, it was reported. And then Queen Elizabeth always was in tune with nature. She was happy, and it began in her childhood with trips to the Scottish countryside of Balmoral. When she got to be an adult and the Queen, she felt the same way. Balmoral was her way to escape all the stresses of her duties, and it kept her going. Queen Elizabeth and Queen Victoria were legends and great queens. Victoria had the support of her people, and during her days as queen, she had a chance to meddle in elections, and it was no secret who she liked politically. Queen Elizabeth had to steer from the 20th century into the 21st century to keep the monarchy modern, and she did it. And she kept the monarchy going by rarely putting the wrong foot forward and acted as a symbolic head of state in Britain in the 63 years she had the crown. So that's a great achievement. Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth were a lot alike. Great-great-grandmother would have been very proud of Queen Elizabeth. She had a long reign and accomplished so many things in her years on the throne. And one thing is for sure, they both won't be forgotten. They were dedicated to their country, and through their commitments, they strengthened the people and the country at the same time. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, it would be greatly appreciated. And be sure to click on the notification bell if you haven't already, and you'll be informed when new videos are released. I hope everybody's been doing well, and tune in again soon for another episode of Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. Thank you. Bye.